Human soldier. Jacob Boyd's life changes in an instant as he stands victorious over the fallen bodies of the Adoshan King's elite guard. The blood-soaked battlefield on the alien world of Adosha falls silent, save for the labored breathing of the lone surviving combatant. Jacob, a seasoned veteran of the United Earth Defense Force, had led a covert mission to sabotage Adoshan defenses when his team was ambushed. Now he finds himself the unexpected heir to Celeste, a stunningly beautiful Adoshan princess. The ancient Adosian custom of transferring ownership of defeated royal family members to victorious warriors has thrust Jacob into a position of unprecedented power and controversy. As he stands among the fallen, the realization dawns on him. He has inadvertently triggered an inheritance protocol that will reshape the course of the human-Adosian war. Celeste emerges from the shadows of the nearby palace, her ethereal beauty a stark contrast to the devastation surrounding them. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and defiance, lock onto Jacob's. The tension between them is palpable, a microcosm of the larger conflict that has brought their two species to this critical juncture. The human-Adosian war, sparked by Earth's desperate need for resources, has ravaged the once lush paradise of Adosha. The planet's surface bears the scars of countless battles, its inhabitants facing a dire future as their world crumbles around them. Jacob's newfound ownership of Celeste grants him significant political leverage, as Adoshan law now recognizes him as a member of their royal family. As news of Jacob's inheritance spreads like wildfire across both human and Adoshan territories, it ignites a firestorm of controversy. Human military commanders view Celeste as a valuable intelligence asset and bargaining chip, their eyes gleaming with the possibilities this unexpected turn of events presents. Jacob's fellow soldiers regard him with a mixture of envy and suspicion, creating a hostile environment within his own ranks. On the Adosian side, a faction of rebels led by Celeste's cousin begins to mobilize. They see the princess as a symbol of their resistance against human aggression, and her capture by Jacob as an unforgivable affront to their people. Whispers of assassination plots against the human soldier begin to circulate through the underground networks of Adosian society. Celeste, initially resentful of her new human master, harbors a secret desire to end the war and save her people from extinction. As she stands before Jacob, her mind races with possibilities. Could this twist of fate be the key to brokering peace between their species? Jacob feels the weight of his new responsibilities settling onto his shoulders. He must navigate the complex political landscape of both human and Adoshan societies, while grappling with his growing attraction to Celeste. The fate of two worlds now rests in his hands, and every decision he makes will have far-reaching consequences. As the dust settles on the battlefield, Jacob and Celeste face an uncertain future. The human soldier who inherited an alien beauty now stands at the crossroads of interstellar conflict, with the power to either escalate the war to new heights of brutality or pave the way for an unprecedented peace. The galaxy watches with bated breath as this unlikely pair begins their journey into uncharted territory, where the lines between enemy and ally, master and subject, begin to blur. As the weight of his newfound responsibilities settled upon Jacob's shoulders, a piercing siren shattered the tense silence. The battlefield, moments ago a scene of carnage and victory, erupted into chaos as UEDF dropships descended from the smoke-filled sky. "Major Boyd," a gruff voice crackled through Jacob's comm unit. "Secure the Adoshan Royal and prepare for immediate extraction. You're being recalled to Earth." Jacob's eyes darted between the approaching ships and Celeste, who stood rigid with apprehension. He took a step towards her, hand outstretched. "Princess, we need to go. Now." Celeste's ethereal features hardened into a mask of defiance. "I will not abandon my people." "You don't have a choice," Jacob said, his voice low and urgent. "Neither of us do." As the dropships touched down, kicking up swirls of dust and debris, Jacob gently but firmly grasped Celeste's arm. She didn't resist, but the tension in her body spoke volumes. They boarded the lead ship, surrounded by a squad of heavily armed UEDF soldiers, who eyed the Adoshan princess with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The journey to the UEDF flagship Horizon passed in a blur of debriefings and medical examinations. Jacob found himself recounting the events of the battle countless times, each retelling leaving him more exhausted than the last. Celeste, separated from him upon arrival, was whisked away by a team of xenobiologists and cultural experts. It wasn't until they were well into their journey to Earth that Jacob saw Celeste again. He entered the small observation deck, seeking a moment of solitude, only to find her standing before the vast window, her silhouette framed by the stars. "Princess," he said, startled by her presence. Celeste turned, her luminous eyes meeting his. "Major Boyd," she replied, her voice cool and controlled. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and barely concealed tensions. Jacob moved to stand beside her, gazing out at the cosmos. "I never thought I'd see the stars like this," Celeste murmured, breaking the silence. "From Adocia, they always seem so distant." Jacob glanced at her, noting the wonder in her eyes despite her efforts to maintain a stoic facade. "They're beautiful," he agreed, "but they can't compare to the forests of your world." Celeste's head snapped towards him, surprise evident on her face. "You admire Adocia?" "I've seen enough war to appreciate beauty where I find it," Jacob replied, his voice tinged with weariness. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Captain Reyes, the Horizon's commanding officer. "Major Boyd, Princess Celeste," he nodded to each of them. "We'll be reaching Earth in approximately 48 hours. I suggest you both prepare for the reception that awaits you." As they approached Earth, the atmosphere on the horizon grew increasingly tense. Jacob found himself subjected to endless briefings, each one hammering home the importance of the information Celeste could provide. The princess, for her part, was treated more like a prized specimen than a sentient being, a fact that didn't sit well with Jacob. Their arrival on Earth was a whirlwind of activity. Jacob was immediately whisked away to UEDF headquarters for debriefing, while Celeste was escorted to a secure medical facility. The separation, though expected, left Jacob with an unfamiliar sense of unease. Days blurred together as Jacob endured interrogation after interrogation. He recounted every detail of his encounter with the Adocian Royal Guard, described Adocian weapons and tactics, and speculated on potential weaknesses in their defenses. Each session left him feeling more like a traitor than a soldier. It was during one such session that Jacob finally snapped. Admiral Kensington, a hard-nosed veteran with little patience for ethical quandaries, was pushing for details on Adocian physiology that could be exploited in combat. "With all due respect, sir," Jacob interrupted, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "we're talking about sentient beings, not targets in a shooting gallery." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "May I remind you, Major Boyd, that we are at war. The information you possess could save countless human lives." "And what about Adocian lives?" Jacob shot back. "We started this war. We invaded their world. And now we're treating a member of their royal family like a lab rat." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Admiral Kensington leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. "Watch yourself, Major. Your unique situation doesn't grant you immunity from the chain of command." The warning was clear, but Jacob couldn't shake the growing discomfort with his role in this conflict. As he left the debriefing room, his mind raced with questions about the true nature of this war and his place in it. Later that evening, Jacob was granted permission to visit Celeste in her secured quarters. He found her standing by the window, her gaze fixed on the unfamiliar Earth skyline. As he approached, she turned to face him, her expression a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Major Boyd," she said, her voice soft but steady, "have you come to extract more information from me?" Jacob winced at her words. "No, Princess, I came to see how you're being treated." Celeste's eyes widened slightly, surprise flitting across her features before she schooled them back into neutrality. "I am alive," she said carefully. "Your people are very interested in my biology." Jacob's mind focused at the implication. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "This isn't right." Celeste studied him for a long moment, her otherworldly eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. "You are different from what I expected, Major Boyd." As they talked, Jacob found himself opening up about his experiences in the war, the toll it had taken on him, and his growing doubts about the conflict. Celeste, in turn, shared stories of Edosia's once peaceful culture and the devastation wrought by the human invasion. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the hallway. Shouts and the sound of running feet echoed through the door. Jacob's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he moved to shield Celeste. The door burst open, revealing a wild-eyed man wielding a makeshift weapon. "Death to the alien scum!" he screamed, lunging toward Celeste. Jacob reacted instantly, tackling the assailant to the ground. They grappled fiercely, the attacker's weapon slashing across Jacob's arm. Despite the pain, Jacob managed to subdue the man just as security forces stormed into the room. As the would-be assassin was dragged away, Jacob turned to check on Celeste. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. Without thinking, Jacob reached out to her, his hand gently grasping her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Celeste nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the blood seeping from Jacob's wound. You protected me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Jacob could respond, medical personnel swarmed into the room, ushering him away for treatment. As he was led out, he caught one last glimpse of Celeste. The look in her eyes had changed, the cold defiance replaced by something new, something that made Jacob's heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the fading adrenaline of combat. As the door closed behind him, Jacob realized that his world had shifted once again. The lines between duty and conscience, between enemy and ally, were blurring. And in the midst of this interstellar conflict, he found himself facing a battle of a different kind, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about loyalty, humanity, and the true cost of war. War and the price of peace. As Jacob pondered these weighty matters, his comm unit chirped, startling him out of his reverie. "Major Boyd, report to briefing room A immediately," came the terse command. Jacob cast one last glance at Celeste, who nodded slightly, her luminous eyes betraying a hint of concern. He hurried out, his mind racing with possibilities. In the briefing room, Jacob found himself face-to-face with Admiral Kensington and a group of stern-faced intelligence officers. The atmosphere was thick with tension. "Major," Kensington began without preamble, "we've uncovered something that changes everything." A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant. "This," the Admiral continued, "is where the Edosians are developing a weapon capable of destroying entire planets." Jacob's blood ran cold as he absorbed the implications. The briefing that followed was a whirlwind of information. The weapon's codename, Stellar Forge, its devastating potential, and the urgent need to neutralize it. "And that's where you come in, Major," Kensington said, fixing Jacob with a penetrating stare. "Your unique relationship with the Edosian princess provides us with an unprecedented opportunity." The plan, as it unfolded, was audacious and fraught with danger. Jacob and Celeste would pose as a diplomatic envoy, using her royal status to gain access to the facility. Their true mission, to gather intelligence and, if possible, sabotage the Stellar Forge. Hours later, Jacob found himself aboard a stealth shuttle disguised as a merchant vessel, with Celeste seated beside him. The close quarters of the cockpit seemed to amplify the tension between them. "I don't like this," Celeste said softly, her gaze fixed on the stars streaking past. "My people will see this as the ultimate betrayal." Jacob's hands tightened on the controls. "If that weapon is real, it's a threat to both our species. We have to stop it." As they approached the moon, a massive structure came into view, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the barren landscape. Jacob transmitted their fabricated credentials, his heart pounding as they waited for a response. "Diplomatic vessel, you are cleared for landing," came the Edosian voice over the comm. "Welcome, Princess Celeste." They touched down on a landing pad jutting out from the facility. As the shuttle's hatch opened, they were greeted by a delegation of Edosians, led by a striking female with iridescent scales. "Celeste!" the Edosian exclaimed, embracing the princess. "It's been too long." "Zara," Celeste replied, her voice a mix of warmth and hesitation. I didn't expect to see you here. Jacob watched the exchange, noting the familiarity between the two. Zara's eyes fell on him, curiosity and suspicion warring in her gaze. And this must be the human who inherited you, Zara said, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp. Major Jacob Boyd, he introduced himself, inclining his head in what he hoped was a respectful gesture. The tour of the facility began, with Zara proudly showcasing Edosian technological achievements. Jacob's trained eye took in every detail, searching for weaknesses, access points, anything that could aid their mission. As they moved deeper into the complex, Jacob felt a growing sense of unease. The level of security, the advanced equipment, all pointed to something far beyond standard research and development. During a moment when Zara was distracted, Celeste leaned close to Jacob, her breath warm against his ear. The lower levels, she whispered. That's where they're hiding something. Jacob nodded imperceptibly, his skin tingling from her proximity. They needed to find a way to slip away from their escorts. The opportunity came during a formal dinner with the facility's staff. As conversations flowed and attention scattered, Jacob caught Celeste's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. Excusing himself, Jacob made his way to what appeared to be a restroom. Instead, he slipped down a restricted corridor, using the hacking tools concealed in his formal wear to bypass security locks. He descended into the bowels of the facility, the air growing cooler and charged with an odd energy. Rounding a corner, he froze. Before him stood a massive chamber. At its center, a swirling vortex of darkness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a voice behind him. Jacob spun to find Zara, her expression unreadable. The power to reshape worlds, to end wars, or start them. Jacob's hand inched towards his concealed weapon, but Zara raised a hand. "Please, Major, let's not resort to violence. Not when we have so much to discuss." From the shadows emerged Celeste, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "I'm sorry, Jacob," she said softly, "but there's something you need to know." As alarms began to blare throughout the facility, Jacob realized that their mission had taken an unexpected and dangerous turn. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance, with Jacob caught between duty, survival, and his growing feelings for Celeste. Celeste. The facility's alarms continued to blare as Jacob's mind raced, trying to process the sudden turn of events. "What's going on?" Jacob demanded, his eyes darting between Zara and Celeste. Zara stepped forward, her iridescent scales shimmering in the pulsating emergency lights. "The Stellar Forge isn't a weapon, Major Boyd. It's a terraforming device, designed to restore worlds ravaged by war." Celeste moved to Jacob's side, her expression a mixture of guilt and willpower. "I couldn't tell you the truth earlier. We needed to ensure the device's security." Before Jacob could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. A squad of Edosian guards rounded the corner, weapons trained on the group. "We need to move," Zara hissed, gesturing towards a hidden panel in the wall. "There's no time to explain everything now." Jacob hesitated for a split second before nodding. Whatever was happening, he knew staying put wasn't an option. He followed Zara and Celeste through the concealed passage, the shouts of the guards growing distant behind them. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, Celeste filled Jacob in on the true nature of their mission. The Stellar Forge was a closely guarded Edosian secret, a last hope for both their peoples to repair the damage caused by the war. "We needed someone from Earth to witness its capabilities," Celeste explained as they ran. "Someone who could bridge the gap between our worlds." They emerged onto a small hangar bay where a sleek, unmarked shuttle waited. Zara quickly input a series of commands, and the ship's engines hummed to life. "Where are we going?" Jacob asked as they boarded. "Back to Earth," Zara replied, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "It's time to end this war." The journey back to Earth was tense, filled with hurried explanations and strategic planning. Jacob learned of the complex web of deception that had brought him to this point, a plan years in the making to bring both sides to the negotiating table. As they approached Earth's orbit, Jacob's comm unit crackled to life. Admiral Kensington's voice filled the cabin, demanding an immediate report. Jacob took a deep breath, exchanging glances with Celeste and Zara. This was the moment of truth. He activated the comm link. "Admiral, this is Major Boyd. Mission accomplished, but there's been a significant development. Request immediate meeting with UEDF High Command. I'm bringing in high-level Edosian representatives." There was a long pause before Kensington's reply came through. "Understood, Major. You're cleared for landing at UEDF headquarters. Security teams will meet you on arrival." As they began their descent, Jacob felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. The next few hours would determine the fate of both human and Edosian civilizations. The landing pad at UEDF headquarters was a hive of activity as their shuttle touched down. Squads of heavily armed soldiers surrounded the ship, their weapons trained on the hatch. Jacob stepped out first, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Stand down," he called out. "We're here to negotiate peace." Admiral Kensington pushed through the line of soldiers, his face a mask of impossibly strong anger and confusion. "What in blazes is going on, Major?" "Sir, I can explain everything," Jacob began, but he was cut short as Celeste and Zara emerged from the shuttle. The soldiers tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. Jacob quickly moved to stand between them and the Edosians. "Admiral, please, what I have to say changes everything about this war." Kensington's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. "Conference room. Now." The next few hours were a whirlwind of revelations, accusations, and tense negotiations. Jacob, with support from Celeste and Zara, laid out the truth about the Stellar Forge and the potential for peace between their species. As the initial shock wore off, the mood in the room began to shift. The possibility of ending the war and repairing the damage done to both Earth and Edosia began to take hold. However, not everyone was convinced. General Hawthorne, a notorious warhawk, smacked his fist on the table. "This is preposterous. We have the upper hand. We should press our advantage and crush the Edosian threat once and for all." His outburst sparked a heated debate among the UEDF leadership. Jacob found himself in the middle, arguing passionately for peace while trying to counter the hardliners' push for escalation. As the arguments raged on, Jacob noticed Celeste growing pale, her breathing becoming labored. He leaned in close, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" Celeste tried to nod, but a violent coughing fit overtook her. She collapsed against him, her body trembling. "We need a medic," Jacob shouted, cradling Celeste in his arms. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sunk in. Zara rushed to Celeste's side, her face filled with worry. "It's the atmosphere," she explained urgently. "Prolonged exposure to Earth's air is toxic to Edosians." As medical personnel swarmed into the room, Jacob made a split-second decision. He scooped Celeste into his arms and headed for the door. "Major Boyd," Kensington bellowed, "where do you think you're going?" Jacob turned, his eyebrows furrowed. "I'm saving her life, sir, and possibly our best chance at peace." With that, he strode out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. As he carried Celeste through the corridors of UEDF headquarters, alarms began to blare. He knew he had only minutes before security locked down the building. A hand grabbed his shoulder, and Jacob spun around, ready to fight. He found himself face-to-face with Captain Elena Rodriguez, a junior officer he had worked with in the past. "I can help," Elena said quickly. "There's a prototype stealth ship in a hangar C. I can get you access." Jacob hesitated for a moment, searching her face for any sign of deception. Finding none, he nodded. "Lead the way." As they raced towards the hangar, Jacob could hear the sound of pursuit growing closer. Celeste stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice weak. "What's happening?" "We're getting you out of here," he replied, tightening his grip on her. "Just hold on." They reached the hangar just as the security teams rounded the corner behind them. Elena quickly input an access code, and the sleek form of the stealth ship, dubbed the Star Dancer, came into view. Jacob carried Celeste up the boarding ramp while Elena prepped the ship for launch. The hangar doors began to close as security forces poured in, weapons raised. "Go!" Jacob shouted to Elena as he secured Celeste in one of the passenger seats. The Star Dancer's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the hangar just as the doors slammed shut. Jacob felt the familiar lurch of acceleration as they climbed rapidly through Earth's atmosphere. As the blue of Earth's sky gave way to the star-studded blackness of space, Jacob allowed himself a moment to breathe. He looked at Celeste, relieved to see some color returning to her face as the ship's life support systems kicked in. Elena's voice came over the intercom. "We've cleared Earth's defense grid, but we've got company. UEDF interceptors closing fast." Jacob made his way to the cockpit, his mind racing. "Set a course for neutral space. There's a station called Haven. It's our best shot at making this right." As the Stardancer accelerated away from Earth, Jacob watched the planet shrink in the view screen. He knew that his actions had just changed the course of two civilizations. Whatever came next, there was no going back. The ship shuddered as the first volley of warning shots from the UEDF interceptors streaked past. Jacob strapped himself into the co-pilot seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Initiating stealth systems," he announced, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with space combat. "Let's hope this prototype lives up to its reputation." As the Stardancer disappeared from the interceptor's sensors, Jacob allowed himself a small smile. The journey to Haven would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time since the war began, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Future for both their peoples. As the Stardancer hurtled through space, evading pursuit, Jacob knew their journey was nowhere near the end. The next few days passed in a blur of hyperspace jumps and tense moments as they narrowly avoided detection by both Earth and Adocian patrols. Celeste's condition improved steadily, her body adapting to the ship's carefully calibrated atmosphere. "We're approaching Haven," Elena announced, her voice tight with fatigue and nerves. "But we've got a problem." Jacob leaned forward, studying the tactical display. A cluster of ships surrounded the massive space station, their signatures a mix of Earth and Adosian vessels. "Looks like word of our little escapade made it here before us," he muttered. As they drew closer, Haven's true scale became apparent. The station was a sprawling construct of interlocking rings and spires, each section housing different alien species and serving various functions. It was a neutral ground, a place where interstellar conflicts could be mediated away from the prying eyes of involved parties. "This is Haven Control," a stern voice crackled over the comm. "Unidentified vessel, state your business and prepare to be boarded." Jacob exchanged glances with Celeste and Elena before responding. "Haven Control, this is Major Jacob Boyd of Earth. I'm requesting asylum and an audience with the station's governing council. We have information crucial to ending the Earth-Adocian War." A tense silence followed before Haven Control responded. "Proceed to Docking Bay 17. Security teams will meet you there." As Elena guided the Stardancer into the assigned bay, Jacob helped Celeste to her feet. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we're in this together." The moment they stepped off the ship, they were surrounded by a mix of human and alien security personnel. Jacob raised his hands slowly, acutely aware of the weapons trained on them. "I'm unarmed," he stated clearly. "We're here to talk, not fight." A tall, silver-skinned alien with 4 arms stepped forward. "I am Chief Security Officer X-Rail. You will be escorted to separate holding areas for questioning." "Wait," Celeste interjected, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "We need to speak to your council immediately. Lives are at stake." X-Rail's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "The council will decide when and if to hear your case. For now, you will comply with our procedures." As they were led away, Jacob caught glimpses of the station's diverse population. Humans mingled with Adocians and dozens of other alien species he couldn't identify. Under different circumstances, he might have marveled at the sight. Hours passed in a sterile holding cell before Jacob was finally brought before Haven's governing council. The chamber was a semicircular room, with raised seats occupied by representatives from various species. At the center stood a striking figure, a tall, avian-like alien with iridescent feathers and piercing golden eyes. "Major Boyd," the alien spoke, her voice melodious yet authoritative. "I am Ambassador Zara Kavash of the Tellarites. I have been appointed to oversee this delicate situation." Jacob straightened, feeling the weight of the moment. "Ambassador, thank you for hearing me. The conflict between Earth and Adocia is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The Stellar Forge..." He was cut off by a commotion at the chamber's entrance. A group of humans burst in, led by a charismatic man with a scarred face. "This is an outrage," the man shouted. "You can't allow this traitor to spread Adoshan lies." Ambassador Kavash's feathers ruffled slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Darius Vex, you were not invited to this session." Jacob's eyes narrowed as he recognized the name. Darius Vex was a notorious human supremacist, known for his inflammatory rhetoric against aliens, particularly Edoshans. Vex pointed an accusatory finger at Jacob. "This man betrayed Earth. He conspired with the enemy and stole classified technology." Before Jacob could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The council chamber erupted into chaos as reports flooded in of multiple system failures across Haven. Ambassador Kavash's voice cut through the din. "Security teams to all critical systems. This is not a drill." Jacob's military training kicked in. "Ambassador, let me help. I have experience with crisis management and combat situations." Kavash studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well, Major, but know that your actions here will greatly influence our decision regarding your asylum request." As Jacob raced out of the chamber, he caught sight of Vex slipping away with a satisfied smirk. Something told him this was only the beginning of their troubles on Haven. The corridors of Haven were in chaos as Jacob made his way to the central security hub. Emergency lights pulsed an angry red, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing people to stumble and float momentarily before crashing back to the floor. "Status report," Jacob barked as he entered the hub, falling easily into his role as a military commander. Chief Security Officer X. Ral turned from a bank of holographic displays, his forearms working furiously across multiple interfaces. "Major Boyd, we have multiple system failures across the station. Life support is failing in sections 12 through 18, and we've lost artificial gravity in the outer rings." Jacob scanned the displays, his mind racing. "This is too coordinated to be an accident. We're dealing with sabotage." As if in response to his words, a new alert flashed across the screens. The station's power grid was destabilizing, threatening to plunge Haven into darkness. "We need to split up," Jacob decided. "X-Ral, take a team and secure the life support systems. I'll head to the power core." As he turned to leave, he nearly collided with Celeste, who had just arrived at the hub. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, a sign of Edosian stress response. "Jacob," she said, slightly out of breath, "I heard about the system's failures. I can help with the power grid. Edosian technology is similar to what's used here." For a moment, Jacob hesitated. The soldier in him wanted to keep Celeste safe, but he knew her expertise could be crucial. "All right," he nodded. "Let's move." As they raced through the corridors, dodging panicked civilians and emergency response teams, Jacob couldn't help but marvel at how seamlessly he and Celeste worked together. Despite their species' long history of conflict, they moved in perfect sync, anticipating each other's actions. They reached the power core to find it in a state of near meltdown. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the air crackled with unstable energy. "The containment field is failing," Celeste shouted over the din of alarms and crackling electricity. "If it goes, it'll take out half the station." Jacob's hands flew over the control panel, but the system wasn't responding to standard override commands. "I can't shut it down." Celeste pushed him aside gently, her fingers dancing across the interface with inhuman speed. "It's been locked out, but I might be able to bypass it using an Edosian encryption algorithm." As Celeste worked, Jacob scanned the room, his instincts on high alert. Something caught his eye, a small, pulsing device attached to the main power conduit. "Celeste, keep working on that bypass," he said, moving towards the device. "I think I found the source of our problems." As he approached, the device emitted a high-pitched whine. Jacob's eyes widened as he recognized the sound. "It's a bomb!" he yelled, diving towards Celeste just as the device detonated. The explosion rocked the power core, sending equipment and debris flying. Jacob felt a searing pain in his side as a piece of shrapnel tore through his uniform. As the dust settled, he found himself sprawled across Celeste, having shielded her from the blast. Their eyes met, and for a moment the chaos around them faded away. "Are you all right?" Jacob asked, his voice hoarse. Celeste nodded, her hand gently touching the wound on his side. "You're hurt," she said, concern evident in her voice. "I'll live," Jacob grunted, forcing himself to his feet. "But we need to stabilize that power core now, or none of us will." With renewed urgency, they returned to the task at hand. Celeste's fingers flew across the controls while Jacob, ignoring the pain in his side, worked to reroute power from damaged systems. Just as it seemed the core would go critical, Celeste let out a triumphant cry. "I'm in! Initiating emergency shutdown!" The humming of the power core began to subside, and the alarms gradually fell silent. Jacob let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We did it," he said, allowing himself a small smile. But their victory was short-lived. The station-wide comm system crackled to life, and Darius Vex's voice filled the air. "People of Haven," he began, his tone dripping with false concern, "what you've just experienced is only a taste of the chaos the Adocians will bring to our worlds. We must stand united against this alien threat." Jacob and Celeste exchanged worried glances. They had stabilized the station, but the real battle, the fight for hearts and minds, was only just beginning. As Vex's inflammatory speech continued, Jacob's comm unit buzzed. It was Ambassador Kavash. "Major Boyd, Princess Celeste," her voice was urgent. "Report to the council chamber immediately. We have much to discuss." Jacob looked at Celeste, seeing his own purpose reflected in her eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Balance. As they exited the council chamber, Jacob and Celeste found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of activity. Over the next few days, Haven buzzed with renewed energy as the station's systems were restored and security measures tightened. The near disaster had shaken the various factions, creating an opening for diplomacy that Ambassador Kavash was quick to exploit. "We're implementing a temporary ceasefire," Kavash announced to Jacob and Celeste as they gathered in her private office. "Both Earth and Adocian representatives have agreed to peace talks, and I want you two as special advisors." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Us? Are you sure that's wise, Ambassador? We're not exactly neutral parties." Kavash's feathers rippled in what Jacob had come to recognize as amusement. "On the contrary, Major, your unique perspective as a human Edosian couple is precisely what we need." Celeste nodded slowly. "We've lived the conflict from both sides. Perhaps we can help others see beyond their preconceptions." As the negotiations began, Jacob and Celeste found themselves at the center of a diplomatic maelstrom. They spent long hours in tense meetings, working to bridge the vast cultural divide between humans and Adocians. "The Stellar Forge isn't a weapon," Celeste explained to a group of skeptical Earth delegates. "It's a terraforming device designed to make barren worlds habitable." Jacob chimed in. "And the Adocian expansion wasn't an invasion. They were seeking new homes for their growing population." Slowly, painfully, progress was made. Old grudges began to soften as both sides came to understand the tragic misunderstandings that had fueled their conflict. But not everyone was pleased with the turn of events. One evening, as Jacob and Celeste walked through Haven's Arboretum, they were confronted by a tall, imposing Adocian in full military regalia. "Princess Celeste," the newcomer said, his voice a low growl, "I see the rumors of your liaison are true." Celeste stiffened. "General Vexter, I didn't expect to see you here." Jacob's hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm would have been, had weapons been allowed on Haven. He'd heard of General Vextor, a decorated war hero known for his hardline stance against humans. "I've come to join the negotiations," Vextor said, his eyes never leaving Celeste. "Someone needs to represent Edocian interests properly." As the general stalked away, Jacob turned to Celeste. "You know him?" She nodded, her scales shifting to a deeper shade of blue. "He was my betrothed before the war." The revelation hung between them, adding another layer of complexity to their already complicated situation. As the days passed, Jacob and Celeste's relationship became both an asset and a liability. They were living proof that humans and Edocians could coexist, even love each other. But their union also drew harsh criticism from conservative factions on both sides. "This is an abomination," Darius Vex shouted during one particularly heated session. "Humans and Adosians were never meant to mix." Jacob stood to respond, but a wave of dizziness washed over him. He stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the table. "Jacob?" Celeste's voice was permeated with concern. "Are you all right?" He nodded, trying to shake off the strange feeling. "I'm fine, just a bit lightheaded." But as the meeting continued, Jacob noticed Celeste seemed off as well. Her normally vibrant scales were dull, and she kept pressing a hand to her abdomen. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Celeste turned to Jacob with wide eyes. I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility and fear. Jacob pulled her close, his mind racing with the implications. "How is that even possible?" he whispered. "I don't know," Celeste replied. "But if it's true, everything is about to change." As if on cue, their comm units buzzed simultaneously. It was Ambassador Kavash, her voice urgent. "We have a situation," she said. "Multiple explosions reported in the diplomatic quarter. All advisors report to the emergency bunker immediately." Jacob and Celeste exchanged a look of tenacity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they hurried to dress, Jacob couldn't help but place a protective hand over Celeste's abdomen. The future of two worlds, and perhaps a new form of life, hung in the balance. And somewhere in the chaos of Haven, their enemies were moving, ready to tear apart everything they had worked for. Jacob and Celeste exchanged a determined look as they rushed to dress. The station's emergency klaxons blared, adding to the sense of urgency. As they hurried towards the exit, Celeste suddenly doubled over, clutching her abdomen. "Celeste!" Jacob exclaimed, catching her before she fell. "What's wrong?" She took a deep breath, her scales shifting to a pale blue. "I'm fine, just a sharp pain. We need to go." Jacob hesitated, concern etched on his face. "Are you sure? Maybe we should get you to medical—" "No time," Celeste interrupted, straightening up. "Haven needs us. Let's move." They raced through the corridors, dodging panicked civilians and emergency response teams. The damage from the explosions was evident. Flickering lights, sparking conduits, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. As they approached the emergency bunker, Jacob pulled Celeste aside into a quiet alcove. "We need a plan. This isn't just another terrorist attack. It's too coordinated." Celeste nodded, her military training kicking in. "Agreed. I think we both know who's behind this." "Vexator and Vex," Jacob said grimly. "But we need proof." A determined glint appeared in Celeste's eyes. "Then let's get it. We know this station better than anyone. If we can find their hideout—" Jacob caught on quickly. "We could expose the whole conspiracy. But it's risky. If we're caught—" "We won't be," Celeste said firmly. She placed a hand on her abdomen, a mix of fear and commitment in her eyes. "We're fighting for more than just ourselves now." Jacob nodded, making a quick decision. He tapped his comm unit. "Ambassador Kavash, this is Major Boyd. Princess Celeste and I are pursuing a lead on the perpetrators. We'll report in when we have more information." Before Kavash could protest, Jacob cut the connection. He turned to Celeste. "Let's go?" They slipped away from the main evacuation routes, using their combined knowledge of human and Adosian tactics to avoid detection. Jacob's military training helped them evade security patrols, while Celeste's familiarity with Adosian technology allowed them to bypass locked doors and security systems. As they made their way through the damaged sections of Haven, Celeste's condition worsened. She tried to hide it, but Jacob noticed her labored breathing and the way her scales kept shifting erratically. "Celeste, we need to stop," Jacob insisted after she stumbled for the third time. "You're not well." She shook her head stubbornly. "We can't. We're close. I can feel it." Before Jacob could argue further, they heard voices echoing from a nearby chamber. They crept closer, pressing themselves against the wall. "Must accelerate the plan," came General Vextor's unmistakable growl. "The humans suspect too much already." "Patience, brother," replied a voice that could only belong to Darius Vex. "Our moment is almost here." Jacob and Celeste exchanged shocked glances. Brother? The implications were staggering. Suddenly, Celeste gasped, a wave of pain washing over her. She slid down the wall, her face contorted in agony. Jacob knelt beside her, torn between the need for stealth and his concern for Celeste. What's happening? The baby, Celeste whispered, her scales pulsing with an otherworldly light. Something's wrong. It's changing. Inside the chamber, the voices fell silent. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps. Jacob made a split-second decision. He scooped Celeste into his arms and dashed down the corridor, away from the approaching danger. He could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit behind them. As they rounded a corner, Jacob spotted a maintenance hatch. He wrenched it open and gently lowered Celeste inside before climbing in after her and sealing the hatch. In the cramped, dark space, Jacob could feel Celeste trembling against him. Her scales were glowing brighter now, casting an eerie light in the enclosed area. Jacob, she whispered, her voice strained. I think the baby is reacting to the stress. It's accelerating the pregnancy, somehow. Jacob's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. The revelation about Vex and Vextor, Celeste's condition, the looming threat to Haven. It was almost too much to comprehend. But as he held Celeste close, feeling the strange energy pulsing from her body, Jacob knew one thing for certain. They had stumbled upon a secret that could change everything. Now they just had to survive long enough to reveal it to the world. Outside their hiding place, the sound of searching parties grew closer. Jacob tensed, ready to defend Celeste at all costs. Whatever happened next, he knew their actions in the coming hours would shape the future of human-Edosian relations forever. Forever. And together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. As the chaos on Haven subsided, Jacob and Celeste found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of activity. The station's medical bay became their new home as doctors and scientists from both human and Edosian backgrounds flocked to study Celeste's unprecedented condition. Dr. Alara Chen, the lead human xenobiologist, examined the latest scans with wide eyes. The fetal development is progressing at an astonishing rate, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display. What should have taken months is happening in a matter of days. Her Edosian counterpart, Dr. Zaxler, nodded in agreement. The energy surge you experienced during the attack seems to have triggered a protective mechanism in the fetus. It's adapting to ensure its own survival. Celeste lay on the biobed, her scales shifting in mesmerizing patterns as waves of discomfort washed over her. Jacob held her hand, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. Is she in danger? He asked, unable to mask the concern in his voice. Dr. Chen shook her head. No, but we'll need to monitor her closely. This is uncharted territory for all of us. As word of Celeste's condition spread, Haven became a hub of diplomatic activity. Ambassador Kavash worked tirelessly, seeing the unique opportunity this situation presented for lasting peace. Your child, she told Jacob and Celeste during one of her visits, could be the key to bridging our two species. We must ensure its safe arrival. Days passed in a blur of medical tests, diplomatic meetings, and moments of quiet intimacy between Jacob and Celeste. The station buzzed with anticipation, not just for the impending birth, but for what it could mean for the future of human-Edosian relations. Then, without warning, it began. Jacob was jolted awake by Celeste's gasp. Her scales were pulsing with an otherworldly light, casting shadows across the dimly lit medical bay. It's time, she whispered, her voice a mixture of fear and excitement. The medical team sprang into action. Dr. Chen and Dr. Zaxler took charge, their previous rivalries forgotten in the face of this momentous event. Jacob stayed by Celeste's side, offering words of encouragement as she fought through each contraction. Hours passed, the intensity building with each moment. Suddenly, Ambassador Kavash burst into the room. We're broadcasting this across Haven and to both homeworlds, she announced. The birth of your child will be a symbol of our new era. Jacob wanted to protest, to shield this intimate moment from prying eyes. But he knew the ambassador was right. Their child would never belong to just them. It belonged to the future of both their species. With a final, tremendous effort from Celeste, their daughter entered the world. The room fell silent as Dr. Chen carefully lifted the newborn, her skin shimmering with an iridescent glow that seemed to shift between human and Edosian tones. "She's perfect," Jacob breathed, tears welling in his eyes as he cut the umbilical cord. As the doctors performed their postnatal checks, Jacob and Celeste shared a moment of pure joy. Their eyes met, conveying a depth of love and wonder that no words could express. "What shall we name her?" Celeste asked, her voice weak but filled with warmth. Jacob smiled, remembering a conversation they'd had long ago about hope and new beginnings. "Aurora," he said softly, "for the dawn of a new age." The news of Aurora's birth spread like wildfire across Haven and beyond. Scientists marveled at the perfect blend of human and Edosian traits, while politicians on both sides scrambled to adjust their policies in light of this living proof of compatible coexistence. In the days that followed, as Celeste recovered and Aurora grew stronger, Haven became the center of the galaxy. Ambassador Kavash seized the moment, calling for a final round of peace negotiations. The Grand Assembly Hall was packed as leaders from Earth and Edosia gathered for the historic occasion. Jacob and Celeste sat in places of honor, Aurora cradled in her mother's arms. As the final terms of the Interstellar Concordat were read aloud, Jacob felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over him. The treaty didn't just end the war, it laid the groundwork for a future of cooperation and shared discovery. Just as the Earth and Edosian leaders stepped forward to sign the document, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Jacob's military instincts kicked in immediately. He saw the glint of weapons, heard the first shouts of alarm. "Celeste, take Aurora and get to safety," he ordered, already moving to intercept the threat. A group of extremists, a mix of humans and Edosians, had launched a desperate attempt to derail the peace process. Jacob quickly assessed the situation, barking orders to the security teams. As he organized the defense, he caught sight of Celeste. Instead of fleeing, she had handed Aurora to a trusted aide and was using her royal authority to coordinate the evacuation of civilians. Their eyes met across the chaotic room, and in that moment, Jacob knew they would face this challenge, as they had faced every other together. The battle raged through the corridors of Haven, a final violent spasm of the hatred that had driven their species apart for so long. Jacob and Celeste fought side by side, their movements in perfect sync as they pushed the attackers back. They found themselves in the docking bay, cornering the last of the extremists as they attempted to hijack a ship. Jacob's tactical experience combined with Celeste's knowledge of Edosian weak points made them an unstoppable team. As the last attacker fell, Jacob and Celeste stood together, breathless but victorious. The sound of approaching security forces echoed through the bay. "It's over?" Jacob said, pulling Celeste close. She nodded, her scales shimmering with exertion and relief. "No," she corrected gently. "It's just beginning." Hand in hand, they made their way back to the assembly hall. As they entered, carrying Aurora between them, a hush fell over the gathered delegates. Then slowly applause began to build. Jacob lifted Aurora high, her skin catching the light and casting a rainbow of colors across the room. The applause grew to a thunderous roar, a sound of hope and unity that seemed to shake the very foundations of Haven. As Jacob lowered Aurora back into Celeste's arms, he caught sight of Ambassador Kavash. The Edosian diplomat's eyes shone with unshed tears as she nodded in approval. Jacob turned to Celeste, drinking in the sight of her holding their daughter. Aurora's eyes, still new to the world, seemed to reflect the vastness of space itself. "Look at what we've done," he whispered, gently touching Aurora's cheek. Celeste's smile was radiant. "Look at what we'll do," she replied. As Haven's artificial day cycle began anew, bathing the station in the soft light of a simulated dawn, Jacob knew that this was more than just the end of a war. It was the beginning of something far greater, a future limited only by the stars themselves.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.